I remember this time in university when I was sitting in class and my professor wanted to show us how to use the debugger GDB for C. He was going through it and he was talking about how amazing it is, but to me, I thought it was very complicated and I was really intimidated. At this point, I had already been coding for about a few months, and at this point I was thinking to myself, why would I want to use a debugger when I can use a print statement to sort of debug my code? Maybe it was just the way that my professor was presenting this, but from that point on, I really wanted to stay away from debuggers. But it was only until I went to my company that I started to use a debugger. I think the first time that I used a debugger was when I was using Eclipse, and then I was learning Java, and my company wanted me to help them build a GUI application. In that GUI application, there were a lot of things called listeners, and there was all this lines of code about listeners, and so I was always wondering how did the code actually work? How did the code go to those listeners? And if you don't know what a listener is just an object that responds to a certain event that's happening in the application. But anyways, I was trying to use these listeners and I didn't know at what point did the code go to this listener versus this listener, and that's when my supervisor taught me how to use a debugger in Eclipse. Once my supervisor showed me how to use the debugger in Eclipse, I started using that debugger for everything, and I would put breakpoints all over my code and figure out at what point did the code go to these listeners or these other event handlers. So this was the main way I started to learn Java, and I also used these techniques when I was doing Android development, and then fast forward to when I started coding in C# and using WinForms, I had to use the same debugger to really understand how the code is working. So in this video, I'm going to go over an example and I'm going to give you a code base, or we're going to go through a code base together, and then we're going to fix some bugs that are in there, and we're going to use the debugger to debug those bugs. This will sort of simulate the job process where your supervisor gives you some code and you have no clue what it is, and then they ask you to fix a bug or add a feature to it. So we're going to simulate this process with my example code. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll really see the value of debuggers and when to start using them in your software development. And if you're not using debuggers yet, then I hope this will really make it clear on why you should start using it now. So my name's Henrik, and I'm here to help you learn the software skills and tools you need to grow in your software development journey. So let's get started. By the way, if you're in the early stages of your programming journey, I've got a special gift for you. It's called my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a guide that will take you from no coding experience to building your first 4 projects. And the best part is it's free. It's a free gift to you. In this coding challenge, I guide you in 30 days to build 4 programming projects, and I give you some tutorials that are in C. But of course, these projects are really generic and really beginner friendly, and so you can actually code them in different programming languages. You can still benefit from this guide because you can just take the principles that are in my challenge and then apply them to your programming language. You can find the challenge in the link in the description, and if you download it and pay attention to what it says, you'll definitely learn some fundamental programming concepts that will give you a good foundation to your software development journey. Alright, so I have this application called Recipe Finder, and it's basically an application where you can store recipes in them. And then here's the menu options. So it gives you some menu options. You can add a recipe, you can delete a recipe, you can display all the recipes, search recipes by name, search recipes by ingredients, then you can have a recipe, and then you can exit. So just as an example, we can run this code. So here's the menu. So we want to add a recipe, so let's do 1. And then say we're gonna do scrambled eggs, and the number of ingredients, there's only maybe, let's just keep it simple, just 1 ingredient, eggs, and then quantity for eggs, 5 eggs. Okay, so this is the first bug. So it says enter ingredient number 2, but I only said that I said that there's only 1 ingredient. So why is it saying it's asking for 2 ingredients? So anyways, let's just say water or salt. Okay, so we added that recipe. Now let's display the recipes. Let's choose 3. All right, so here's going to display all recipes. Recipe 1 for scrambled eggs, it only has 1 ingredient for the eggs. It's just 5 ingredients. So that's the first bug, was that it was asking me for 2 ingredients, but I only specified 1. So that's the first bug. And then the second bug is, say I want to have a recipe. So let's have the scrambled eggs recipe. So let's say scrambled eggs. So I said have the scrambled eggs recipe, and it found this scrambled eggs recipe, and then it says this is the amount of ingredients you have before having, it's 5, And if you cut it in half, then you have 2 eggs. So that's the second bug. So it's not going to be, for this recipe at least, it's not going to be 2 eggs, it's going to be 2.5, because half of 5 is 2.5. So say your supervisor is giving this code to you and then you need to fix these bugs. So how would we go about doing this? If you look at the code, you're going to see all these lines of code and it can be overwhelming. So what do we do here? So I'll teach you that one of the first things that I would do when I would be given a code base is I would start putting in some breakpoints to figure out at what point do we get to certain parts of the code. So if you remember, this is where the first bug happened. So it says enter ingredient 2. So what I would do if I saw this bug happening, I would say, okay, there's a print statement enter ingredient. So that gives me a hint on where the bug is happening. So let's look for enter this string here in our code. By the way, this is the extension that I'm using for this debug tutorial. So you just find this extension in your Visual Studio Code, install it, and you'll see this debugger that I'm about to show you. So if I know the bug is happening here, I would just put a breakpoint here, and then we go here, and then we're going to use the C/C++ runner debug option. Alright, so it's in debug mode. You can see it because of these options here. These are typical options that show up when a debugger is running. So you can pause the program, you can restart the program, you can stop the program, and then you'll see these are for stepping in and out of functions and stepping through your program. So let's go to our program here. We're gonna try to reproduce the bug. So we'll say 1, and then the recipe name is, all right, so that's the first time. So this is when the program is at this point right now. So the first time is okay, right? Because we were entering the name of the first ingredient, but it's only when the second time happens that the issue happens. So this is how you'll step through your code. You'll use something called step over. So it's gonna step through the code. So you see it went from here to here, and then let's go again. So it stopped, the debugger sort of stopped because there's a scanf, and that means it's waiting for the user to input something. So the first thing that we put is eggs, right? Okay, so now the program keeps running. So it's about to say enter the quantity for the eggs. So let's do that. And then it's going to go to the scanf, and then we go here again. So it says enter quantity for eggs, and then it's going to ask me, the debugger is waiting for the user to input the quantity. So we'll say 5, and then it's about to exit the for loop. And so we expect it from here, it's going to jump to here to line 97, but for some reason it's going to go up to 91. So let's keep going. So it's actually going to go up to this for loop, and this is another reason why debuggers are really cool, because you can see how the for loop is iterating the I. So if you look at the value for I is 0 right now. So we went through this for loop the first time, I was 0, and then you can see that at the end of the for loop it's going to increment the I. So you see this arrow here, it's saying that he's about to do the I++ for the for loop. So if you just do this one more time, okay, there you go. So now the I is 1. So this is another reason why debuggers are really good, because it really helps you understand how the code is working, how the code syntax actually works. And just from that example, you're able to see that the I++ happens at the end of the for loop. Maybe that's kind of obvious for you, but if you're new to programming, or if you're learning a new programming language, and then they have different syntax that you're not familiar with, then having that debugger is good, because you can step through the code, and then you can see at what point do certain parts of the line get executed. So in this case, we were able to see that this I++ was executed right before it came to this printf. Okay, so I is equal to 1, and it's about to print this printf statement here, the enter ingredient. And this is where the bug happens. So we don't expect the for loop to continue going. We were expecting it to go to 97, because I said there's only one ingredient, right? Oh yeah, right here I said there was only one ingredient. Enter number of ingredients is 1. So if we can double check, we can look at what was this actual value here, the new recipe ingredient count. Yeah, so usually with debuggers, you can usually highlight the variable and then you hover your mouse over it, and then it'll show you the value. So it's actually 1 here. So that's correct, right? So we expect that, or you can also add it to something called the watch window. So we can copy this. So here in this watch window, I added the new recipe. I just typed in new recipe, and then you can see, yeah, you can see the elements of this new recipe structure. And so the ingredient count here is 1. And so that's what we expect, right? And so why is the for loop going through this again? I is equal to 1, ingredient count is equal to 1. So this statement is actually true. So since that statement is true, it went into this line. And so we don't want it to go into this line. So we want this condition to be false when I is equal to 1. Right now it's true because I is 1 and new ingredient count is 1, and there's an equal sign. So if we just remove the equal sign, then that will ensure that when I is equal to 0, this statement will be true, and then when I is equal to 1 for the next iteration, this is going to be false, so it'll be able to exit out. So let's save this, and then let's try rerunning it. Okay, let's add recipe again. Scrambled eggs 1, eggs 5. Okay, there you go. So it only asked me for one ingredient. It didn't ask me for a second ingredient when I said that there's only one ingredient there. So that's one bug down. All right, so the next bug is when we do the have a recipe. So if we do 6 and then we say scrambled eggs, why is it saying that it's 2 eggs after having when it should be 2.5? So we can look at this string and see where in the code that this string is, and that's where the bug is happening. So let's look for that. Okay, so here's where that string is. So the bug is happening somewhere in here. So we need to look in the code where the have is happening. And so this is probably the line where it's happening. So we can put a breakpoint here, and then we can run the debugger. All right, so now the debugger has brought us to the line where the division happens. Okay, so there are 2 possible theories for why it's showing 2 instead of 2.5. So the first theory is the variable is actually 2, and so when this calculation is the culprit and it's causing the division to be only making it 2. The other possibility is the printf statement. Maybe the printf statement is truncating the variable value, so it's only showing a 2 instead of the whole value of 2.5. And so that kind of makes sense too, because it's %d, and %d, as we know, is for integers. So that's one idea. But if you have a debugger, you can easily figure this out right away. So you can just add this variable to the watch window, and so we can look at it there. And so if you look at it here, it says that the value is 5 at first, but then if we step through this, we do the division and see what happens. Is it going to be 2.5 or is it going to be 2? Okay, so we iterated through, we went through this line, and it's a 2. So the problem is not with the printf statement. The printf statement is simply just showing the value of this variable, and so it's actually that this is the culprit here. This line is the culprit. So can you kind of guess why 5 divided by 2 is 2? After you've been coding for a while, you'll start to have an idea that, okay, maybe this is doing integer division rather than doing like a decimal or a float division. And so what we can do is we can look at this quantities variable and see, we can actually hover over it and see what the type is. And you can actually see right there that it keeps going away because my mouse is moving. But you can see right there that the type is int. And so if you do if you divide a 5 int by 2, it's going to do integer division. So the value, the valuation is going to be 2. So to fix this bug, we need to change this type from int to float. So we scroll up here, and indeed we can see that in the struct, the quantities element is actually int. So we need to change this to float. And then here we want to make sure that it's doing a float division. So we just put 0.0 there to make sure that we're dividing like a float, and then change this to f. Okay, let's stop the debugger. Let's run that. Okay, moment of truth. All right, so there you go. So now it says 5, and now it's doing 2.5. So we're able to fix the bug, but I want to make this prettier so it's not showing so many decimal points. So let's just change this up a bit. Okay, there you go. So that's better. So now we're able to fix both of the bugs, and you can see how the debugger was really helpful in figuring out what's causing the bugs and really isolating where the bug is happening, and then being able to see the values in the watch window, and then you can see what the values of those variables are. And so having a debugger can really save you a lot of time for your development. Okay, so to recap, we fixed 2 bugs in that code, and thanks to the debugger, we're able to isolate the bug. We're able to use the debugger to understand how the code syntax is working. Like for that for loop, we're able to see how that I variable was incremented. So that's one value of having a debugger. Another value is that we're able to isolate where the bug is happening. Was it happening at the division for the eggs, the 5 eggs, or is it happening at the print statement? So we're able to isolate, oh, it was happening with the division operation. So that's another place where the debugger showed some value. And another value of having a debugger, and I didn't really get to showcase this with this example because this example code was really simple, but when you have more complex programs, you have bigger code bases, and then you don't understand at what time does the code get to this function, then a lot of times in my company we always put a breakpoint there and then see at what point does the software go to that part of the code. And then so when we see that happening, we can really understand how our code is actually working. All right, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off in your programming journey and you don't know where to start, you can download my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a 30-day guide where I teach you how to build those 4 beginner programming projects. It's really beginner friendly, and I go step by step on how to build each one and go through the tutorials that you need to build each one. So download that in the link in the description. All right, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helped you out, and if it did help you out, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any other questions about debuggers, if you get stuck and you're still overwhelmed about how to use the debugger, just let me know in the comment section. I'll be sure to help you answer your questions. And if you have any other questions about debuggers in general, feel free to let me know in the comment section. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.